What is up, QB List fam? It's Brett Ford here with Chris Helle. We're here on our new podcast, Ball Street, the QB List Stock Exchange. Chris, I'm excited to get this rolling. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We were spoiled with the great week one slate, all those games. I don't think there was really any game that wasn't a fun one to watch.
Well, there was if you were a Ravens fan. Sunday night was a painful reminder that the Ravens just don't know how to close sometimes. So other than that, weekend was a lot of fun. And frankly, it was a good weekend for most of my fantasy teams. How'd you do?
I did pretty well. I think across I won almost all of my leagues except for actually our QB list prodigy league was the lone loss of the week that hurt. So it was close. I think in that league I had AJ Brown, so I'm hoping things will turn around rest of the season.
Well, speaking of things kind of shifting, we're talking the stock values, the rising and falling values of fantasy assets here on Ball Street, the QBL Stock Exchange. So we're looking at guys to buy. We're looking at guys to buy low. We're looking at guys to sell high, and we're looking at guys to maybe hold, maybe stash. As a reminder, as we go through these, we're speaking in generalities about player value, right? It all depends on your league mates, the opposing managers, and their feelings on those specific players. So when we say, hey, this guy is a buy or this guy is a sell, that doesn't mean you should take Saquon Barkley and offer him up for whoever we're talking about, or that you should just cut bait entirely. It really depends on what it costs to get them and what you're getting in return from other managers. And that's, sometimes out of your control. So these are just suggestions, roster construction tips. So do what you will with those and don't necessarily make these rash decisions that sometimes haunt fantasy managers, especially after only 1 week. We talk about overreaction, Chris, and you don't want that just in response to one guy telling you to buy low on somebody or sell high on somebody.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I'm a very active manager, and I think even after week one is still a little too early to be really, making too many moves. I think I'm probably holding fast in pretty much all my leagues right now. I think we don't really have a lot of data to really do anything with, but as we're talking through each of these guys and we're considering, these guys are above value or undervalue after our week one. This is just something that you're kind of taking note of as you're going forward, and you might try to make a move in the next week or two.
Before we get to some of the guys whose stock value have changed this week, let's talk about some injuries, some news and notes. We'll power through these as fast as we can so we can really get to the meat of the podcast here. Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Drake London is day-to-day with a shoulder injury. Darnell Mooney might be coming back for week 2. Chris, how do you see this panning out if we are, if both guys are in, if one guy misses, how do you see this panning out?
Yeah, I didn't get any Drake London shares, which I'm a little upset with, but I do have Darnell Mooney in a few places. So if Drake London were to miss this upcoming week and Mooney's back in, I think Mooney's a must start. If they're both in, I think Mooney is probably still a flex potential guy. I think it kind of depends on who else you have on your roster. And if they both miss time, the rest of the roster is a little shaky. You might want to hit waivers for guys like Ray McLeod, Cordero Hodge. That would be under consideration, but we don't really have that information right now. So I think Pitts would probably be the, target share leader clearly if both of those guys are out.
Excellent. Yeah, London is one of my most drafted players, so had to take him at the 1-2 turn in most leagues, but I was proud to say I got him in about half of my leagues, so very excited about that. Hopefully he stays healthy for me.
You got to take him at the 1-2 turn. Lucky.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, he lasted to the 1-2 turn for me in several places. That's fair. Let's move on to Las Vegas Raiders tight end Brock Bowers. He's day-to-day with his knee injury that he sustained in the Raiders game against New England this past weekend. Another tight end in the AFC West, Evan Ingram of the Denver Broncos. We don't have an update on Ingram yet as of Tuesday night while we're recording. It was a lower leg injury. It looked like it was sustained on contact, but it's also been reported as soft tissue. So we're kind of speculating here. Don't really have an update. We'll move on to the Philadelphia backfield. Chris, your Eagles are going to be without Will Shipley for some time, but they acquired Tank Bigsby. How does that change the backfield in Philadelphia behind Saquon?
Yeah, I think Shipley was kind of seen as the primary handcuff to have. He put a lot of good stuff on film over, extending to last year. And this year he was the obvious number two behind Saquon. Um, but bringing in Tank Bigsby now and the injury to Shipley, I think if I owned any Shipley shares, I would have been dropping them at this point. Even in Dynasty, I think that I liked Shipley as, a kind of role player for giving Saquon a breather, but I don't really see him as a true difference maker. A lot of times in fantasy, when I'm looking at handcuffs, I want guys that I'm excited about if their primary lead back were to go down. I think Shipley was a little bit more on just being a beneficiary of a good offense with a good offensive line, and he would be getting a lot of volume. So I think right now with Shipley's injury, bringing over Bigsby, AJ Dillon saw a good bit of field time, so I probably really wouldn't touch any of them.
So no interest in Dillon there, even with the acquisition of Bigsby.
I don't think so. I think I had hopes for AJ Dillon. I thought he was going to be used a little bit more on the goal line, short yardage situations. It really didn't seem like that. It seemed like really anyone that we had, we were just kind of throwing out there to give Saquon a breather.
Let's move on to the AFC West, or move back to the AFC West, actually. It's going to be wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, Xavier Worthy. He's down with the dislocated shoulder. He's going to miss some time. We saw Hollywood Brown be the most targeted pass catcher this weekend with 16 targets in Brazil. When the Kansas City Chiefs get back to the States, is that going to stick?
I don't know. I think that he probably will stay with a very strong target share in the team. It seemed like he was running a lot in the slot, and that's usually the position that's where Rashee Rice was getting his targets from. That's where Worthy kind of stepped into over the back half of last year. So, I think that he's still going to be absolutely relevant. I don't know if I'm clamoring to waivers to, if it's fab, and I wouldn't be throwing all my budget on him for like a long-term play. I think that he's just kind of going to be filling in a good role here over the stretch, but Worthy will be back. Rice will be back long-term. I think Kelsey really didn't see as much action as we thought he would have in that game. He'll probably take a step forward in target share this week. So I do like Hollywood Brown filling out that slot role, but I'm not rushing to waivers to make him my top priority.
So for me, this feels like Andy Reid sticking to his game plan in Brazil. It feels like Xavier Worthy was going to be targeted heavily in that one, and they just kind of put Hollywood in that spot and said, you know what, let's stick to the game plan. We'll put Hollywood there and we'll go. I wouldn't be shocked to see Reid and this offense do something entirely different, going and having a whole week knowing that they're going to be without Xavier Worthy, right? Like I could see them targeting Kelsey heavier, like you said. I could see them getting him Noah Gray and maybe even like Jared Wiley involved as that second and third tight end. I could see them leaning heavily on the run game with Pacheco and Hunt. So we'll see what they do. But I wouldn't be surprised if things are a little bit different and we see Hollywood come back to earth a little bit.
Yeah, there was some good stuff out of the rookies too. Brashard Smith, he was a running back, but they use him a lot in the slot. I think Jalen Royals also, he seemed to have a little bit of camp buzz going at some point. So I wouldn't be too surprised that, this is an offense. Andy Reid is one of the most respected play callers there is. I really don't see a situation where they're going to force their hand to make someone the guy. They'll design targets and plays for certain situations. They'll be ready.
We know Philly fans still got love for Big Red. We'll move on to the San Francisco 49ers. There's a whole litany of injuries in San Francisco as they prepare to face the Saints this week. Brock Purdy is uncertain for Sunday's game with a left shoulder and a toe injury. Juwan Jennings is at this point day-to-day with his shoulder injury. There was an update that said it was a non-serious injury, which is good. And then, of course, the worst news of the week, George Kittle strains his hamstring. He's placed on IR, so he will miss several weeks for the Niners there. what does the landscape of that offense look like? Is it just going to be CMC? Are we going to see more Ricky Pearsall? What are we thinking?
Oh, I'm all in on Ricky Pearsall, Slick Rick. I really wish that I was higher on him in preseason. My brother was very high on Juwan Jennings, and I was pretty adamant about saying Ricky Pearsall is going to take a step forward this year. Didn't get a lot of shares of him, but where I do have him, I'm very glad to have him. He had a great first week. Again, this is an offense with a good offensive play caller. I think Juwan Jennings, it's a good news that he avoided anything major. MRIs came back and said that anything serious was avoided, so that's good. But it's going to be a lot of CMC for sure, as it always is. And I think Ricky Pearsall is probably the next guy. I think they have a few tight ends that they'll use intermittently here. So absolutely.
Yeah, Jake Tongus or Tongus or whatever his last name is, with a huge end zone grab last week to seal the win over the Seahawks. So we could see them go deep into their depth chart there. We'll take a break. Now that we're done news and notes, we'll be back with more Ball Street after this. Perfect. And we'll jump right into quarterbacks. First up is Daniel Jones. Then it's Tua. So those are from the same game. That's easy. And then it's Herbert. Beautiful.
Sweet.
Buy low, sell high. That's business on Ball Street. We're back with the newest podcast on QBL Podcast Network, Ball Street, the QBL Stock Exchange. I'm Brett Ford, joined by Chris Helle, and we're talking rising and falling stocks of players in the NFL after week one. And Chris, we're jumping right in with quarterbacks. We've got two guys from the same game here trending in opposite directions. Indianapolis Colts quarterback Daniel Jones had an excellent outing on Sunday as they trounced Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins. Tua looked rough, to say the very least, and it just wasn't good for the Dolphins. I think Mike McDaniel might already be on the hot seat, and in the meantime, you've got Daniel Jones just lighting them up on the other side. Talk me through this game. Talk me through these two quarterbacks and their opposite trending values.
Yeah, I think Miami was a team that I generally faded across all of my leagues. I didn't touch either receiver. I didn't want to touch Tua. I think just it was a very fragile situation. Don't really trust Josh McDaniels as a head coach. The whole situation, Mike McDaniel, sorry. I just didn't really have a lot of faith in this offense, and it kind of showed its hand. Now on the Colts, but previous Miami cornerback Xavier Howard, he put out a statement saying, we knew that he, referring to Tua, gets the ball out pretty quick. Once we took away his first read, it's panic mode after that, and it showed. And that was just absolutely true. This offense seems to have been kind of figured out. I don't really know if they're going to have any solutions to it. And we saw last year that without Tua, kind of the bottom falls out from underneath it. So, as far as stock value goes, Tua, Tyreek, Waddle, really all Miami, even Achane didn't see as many targets as we would have expected from him. This whole offense just tanked in stock value. But on the other side of the ball is Daniel Jones, and this is one that I'm pretty excited for, and I'm sure Jay is too, as one of his flag plants. He's kind of this year's Darnold as a parent, as far as changing teams, new system, and really resurrecting his career. He had only 29 pass attempts on 33 dropbacks, but he was a 76% completion rate, or adjusted completion rate rather, and 2 rushing touchdowns. And there's only 4 quarterbacks that had 2 rushing touchdowns this week: Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, Josh Allen. Very mobile quarterbacks, and that was to Jay's point. So from where Daniel Jones is being drafted to his value now, it is just to the moon. If you have him, I'm holding right now because I don't think that this was just a 1-week thing. I think that he actually will be a good value to hold at least through this early part of the season. I think I'm going to expect him to be the starter for the rest of the season. I think he's got a few more good games early on here. If you are in a dynasty league and you have him, I'd absolutely consider throwing him in, a super flex league rather. I would be absolutely starting him in a super flex league. If you're in a one QB league, usually trade value for quarterback is pretty low, but he played great, and all the pass catchers were there for him, and it's an offense that I think really opens some eyes.
So I'm in a unique situation, and this is purely anecdotal. Uh, but I've got a super flex league where I went quarterback early. So I have Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow as my starting quarterbacks. And then I have Daniel Jones, who sat on my bench this week. Um, are you in a super flex setting? Are you looking to shop Daniel Jones to see what you can get? And what kind of value are you looking for in return?
So my brother's in one that he has Daniel Jones in kind of similar situation, and he's considering doing a package deal, throwing find. So this is a big thing with trades that I always look for, and this is one thing that I love about Sleeper is that you can see under the trade setting, or you can see all of the team's rosters. So I would find a QB needy team to target and see if they have one of their players that was underperforming. So if you have a situation where you can package Daniel Jones with a guy like DJ Moore to get maybe an underproducing wide receiver one, like the Drake Londons, the AJ Browns, for a QB needy team to be able to throw Daniel Jones in their super flex spot, they would be a lot more enticed to take the, selling a little bit lower on their wide receiver one that just underproduced to kind of take a little bit of a hit at their wide receiver position to fill in that super flex spot.
So, as we're talking about the Dolphins and the Colts have a huge test next week. They host the Denver Broncos, one of the top defenses in the NFL. Miami gets to return home to face the division rival Patriots. Which situation do you prefer? Both of them kind of regressing to the mean, I think. Colts facing a better defense, and Miami in a little bit better situation at home.
Yeah, I think you said it about right, is that they are both going to kind of regress somewhere to the mean. The Colts, I had them ranked as the top defense this year, and I think flashes of it showed. I think they could have been a lot stronger to start the game. But yeah, I think that it's going to be a real test and be really showing for the Colts up against that defense. I still think that I would trust that offense to produce the way that they were running. I think it's been a close game, probably a lower scoring game, unless Denver just really blows the roof off of the Colts defense. But Miami, I still have faith in New England's defense. I think that they're probably a middle of the pack defense with upside. I really don't know if I can trust that offense the way it's trending right now. The news with Tyreek just broke about his ex-wife charges. So there's a lot of commotion going on with Miami right now that I just don't have a lot of faith in their kind of franchise momentum at the moment.
I will say the one thing about Miami that they have working in their favor is that stadium orientation with the sun beating down on the visitors' bench. In that Miami heat, it's scheduled to be probably in the high 80s on Sunday afternoon, and the Patriots are going to be sitting there probably sweating in their dark uniforms because Miami wears all whites at home. So we'll see how the environment plays into the Dolphins' favor as well. Let's move on to another quarterback. This one performed really well in Brazil. Justin Herbert, Los Angeles Chargers quarterback, 25 for 34, 318 yards and 3 scores. And then 7 carries for 32 yards as well, as the Chargers finally got past the division rival Chiefs to start the season 1-0. Chiefs are the only 0-1 team in the AFC West. What did we think about Herbert's performance?
I mean, we all knew Herbert is just an incredible talent. He can throw the ball better than most quarterbacks in the league. He's one of the top guys in that regard. I think with fantasy, we have generally been lower on him because he didn't have that rushing upside. But I mean, he had 7 carries for 32 yards, as you mentioned, and he looked really good. Like he's a fully capable runner that just really, it's if the opportunity presents himself. And I kind of wish that going into the season, I had realized that, with Najee Harris and that whole situation, and Amarian Hampton was going to be the bell cow, but he is a rookie. So we see Greg Roman as a run first offensive coordinator, but they really just leaned into the pass a lot more. And we saw success from QJ, from Keenan Allen, Ladd, obviously. So Herbert just, he slung the rock like he always does. Had a little bit of rushing upside, which we love. His stock is much, much higher, especially in my books.
Yeah, and I think a high tide raises all ships. You talked about Quentin Johnson and Keenan Allen. They might be available on waiver wires in shallower leagues. Those are two guys that I would be interested in picking up, especially Keenan Allen. He was a guy that I was very excited about this draft season. I have several shares of. So definitely the Chargers passing game, assuming that Greg Roman sticks to their strengths, looks really strong. We'll move on to running backs. There's several backfield situations that kind of sorted themselves out in week one. Let's start with just kind of going through each of them, trying to figure out which ones are sorted, which ones are still up in the air. Seattle Seahawks, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet had a weird split that we weren't expecting. The Jaguars, Travis Etienne took over. The Cardinals backfield split was a little bit more even than I thought it might be with James Conner and Trey Benson. And then the Jets backfield split, Breece Hall seemed to elevate himself over Braylon Allen after there was discussion of maybe that being a committee in New York. Talk about which of the running backs in those four backfields you're really excited about and which ones you might be a little bit less excited about after seeing them in week one.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously ETN was the big surprise. This was a backfield that no one really had a full, pin on, but I think this is a little bit of a factor of, especially with the Tank Bigsby trade that just went through after this game. It makes me think that there might have been something in the works and they were seeing if they could really lean on not having Bigsby around. So that might be a factor there. So we might see a little bit more of Tootin and maybe LaQuint Allen mixed in the coming weeks. But I did throw the dart on ETN in one of my leagues. I think it was actually our QBL Prodigy League. So I was a little bit behind with AJ out. So I went for ceiling, started ETN, and it worked to some extent, but not enough. So that was one that I was pretty excited about. I think as far as trade values go, I'm actually really eyeing up Ken Walker. The backfield, the carries were split 10 to 12 in favor of Charbonnet, but Ken Walker had all three targets to the running back room, and he actually saw 9 more snaps than Charbonnet did, 30 to 21. So he was on the field a little bit more. He got the pass catching work. I think Charbonnet is definitely a capable back, and it's going to be a split backfield. But as far as value goes, Charbonnet was more productive on his runs, and I think a lot of those were just kind of situationally. He had just better opportunities when the ball was in his hands. And we know how talented Ken Walker is. So his value right now is probably just plummeted, and I'm hopeful that, if the backfield continues to be split the way it is, that he's going to be a reasonable buy. And, the biggest hope of it all is that he stays healthy.
I'm actually in the camp, looking back at the Jaguars backfield, I'm actually in the buy high camp on ETN. I think that he is a guy who, I take that back. In the preseason, my thought was that the Jacksonville Jaguars RB1 would be someone that I would want on my roster. Now, a lot of us, myself included, thought that would be Tank Bigsby. It appears to be ATN. And the way that Liam Cohen has run his offense in the past, he has typically leaned on one guy. You look at Bucky Irving last year in the way that he emerged. I truly believe that Cohen is going to unlock something in ETN if he remains the RB1. I want the Jacksonville RB1 on my roster. And if I can acquire ETN now for maybe a little bit more than, his manager paid in the draft, somebody in the 5th or 6th round that I drafted. I'm trying to think of examples here. Like if I could take Emeka Egbuka and I could flip him for Travis Etienne, I think I would do it in most formats. I know that's maybe a hot take, but I want Jacksonville RB1 on my roster because I think that's going to be a top 12 running back, whoever it ends up being.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think going into it, the way I saw it too was also when you see a guy who was top 5 in his position a year before and he has an off year, it seemed like, Trevor Lawrence went down. Like I think that I'm a big believer in seasonal momentum within teams. And I think stuff really fell off the rails with Jacksonville between the injury. They had back-to-back international games. I think it was just a kind of situation where it was just really awkward and nothing really worked out in their favor. So just the season kind of just stumbled along for them. So I think with Liam Cohen and this offense kind of getting a refresher, Trevor Lawrence is healthy. Yeah, absolutely. I think ETN's going to be, I can't say a top 5 again, but he's definitely going to be a guy that you're going to want on your rosters. And if there's a time to get him, it's probably now before he really solidifies himself in that role.
Let's move on to a couple running backs who might have disappointed in week one. New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara, and then Pittsburgh Steelers running back Caleb Johnson. Kamara, two separate situations, obviously. Kamara, wasn't outstanding as far as production goes, and then Caleb Johnson just really didn't see an opportunity. Are you really out on either one after 1 week, or are you going to go back to the well here, give either one of them a second chance?
I think I'm out on both. If there's either of them that I would be in on, I think it'd be Caleb Johnson, and that would be a much more long-term play, or more of a dynasty play. I think when you look at New Orleans, Kellen Moore runs one of the fastest paced offenses, and they ran probably one of the most plays of any offense this past week. And Kamara saw only 11 carries, and the real thing was 2 targets. His whole thing is that he's a pass catcher and he's a PPR machine. And that really took a hit this last week, and that hurts. And, he's not getting any younger. He's a guy that's been injured in the past. This isn't an offense that we're super high on to be producing a lot. So if I'm a Kamara owner, I'm grateful that he got in the end zone this last week, but I'm really, really shaky about his outlook. And not having Kamara, I don't think I really want to reach out to the Kamara owner trying to get him. Caleb Johnson, it's funny, in our Discord, we were talking about the Pittsburgh backfield and how it was Jalen Warren just got extended and they had Caleb Johnson there. And we thought that Caleb Johnson was, he was listed as 3rd on the depth chart, but we figure that's just a seniority thing. He's the number 2 back, and Kenneth Gainwell was just chopped liver. And I wanted to chime in there as an Eagles fan saying, we've had Kenny Gainwell for the last few years, and when he was around guys like Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift, he really wasn't doing that well. And last year when he had Saquon around, I noticed with his touches that he just looked more explosive. He looked like he picked up a few little quips here and there. His stats don't really reflect it, but that was just like an eye test thing. And I was kind of voicing my concerns to this Pittsburgh backfield that I thought Kenneth Gainwell was going to be just kind of a vulture with certain situations, that he was going to draw away from both of the other guys, and that I really didn't want a piece of any of that backfield. It was quite the surprise to see just how involved he was this week, but I think that my concerns were in the right place, and I think Arthur Smith and his running back backfields are always just this black box that you never know what you're going to get. So I don't think I'm really reaching out to get any of them. I think Kenneth Gainwell might be an interesting waiver pickup if you have a roster spot that you just want to throw the dart at. I'm not clamoring at the bits to go get him, but I don't think I really want to touch Caleb Johnson.
Yeah, Kenneth Gainwell looks like he's going to be this year's Tyler Algier, and just kind of throw a wrench in the rest of the Pittsburgh backfield production. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk wide receivers and tight ends after this. All right, we're making pretty good time. If we can try to get through each of these wide receivers and tight end in like 6-7 minutes each, we'd be in really good shape. When we come back, I do want to try to promote what we saw, as well as all the other things that we have going on. Let me pull up the makeshift script that I have for that. All right. Where are you, makeshift script? Okay. All right, I'm not muted. Okay, perfect. Welcome back to Ball Street, the QBL Stock Exchange. I'm here with Chris Helle. Welcome back to the QBL Stock Exchange, Ball Street. I'm here with Chris Helle. I really need to work on that. Okay. Welcome back to Ball Street, the QBL Stock Exchange. I'm Brett Ford here with Chris Helle, and we're talking rising and falling stocks of NFL players. Before we continue, though, I want to make sure that we promote what we saw. What we saw is your weekly shortcut to playing fantasy football smarter. The QB List team watches every snap every week to give you the ins and outs of every NFL game in minutes, not hours. We go beyond the box score to deliver contextual insights and actionable advice to help shape your next move. Make sure to check us out on QB List and in the fantasy football subreddit every Monday morning. We watch every game, so you don't have to. That's what we saw. One of my favorite columns every week. Chris, I know that you contribute to it. I contribute to it. We have an awesome team who tracks every snap, takes into account every fantasy relevant asset, and some even go deeper than that. So it's a great read every Monday morning and something that I wouldn't go without in fantasy circles.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's definitely worth checking out on Reddit, hitting the comments. Each of our writers chimes in there, drops a little comment saying, "Hey, I covered this game. If you have any questions, let me know, and we'll answer any of your questions for you." That's one of my favorite things. I covered the Eagles and Cowboys, and I got questions on Dak, on Pickens. It's a lot of fun for me to kind of share that information of like, there's just these missed opportunities. I still feel really good about them. Definitely check it out on Reddit and make sure to read all our games.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions on Keon Coleman, which is a great segue into wide receivers. Coleman looked outstanding on Sunday night for the Bills, at least in the fourth quarter. The first three quarters, he kind of disappeared for a little while, but when the game script flipped, when Josh Allen needed him, Coleman stepped up and looked like a bona fide alpha for about 15 minutes there. Did you watch any of that game, and what were your thoughts on Coleman?
Oh, of course. I was watching that game, and I thought he looked great. I think that exactly as you said, stepping up in the fourth quarter when Josh Allen needed him is exactly what you want to see if you were able to pick him up in any of your drafts. This is a guy that high draft capital guy that had a pretty slow first year, maybe not what everyone hoped for or expected, but year two breakouts are a very common theme with wide receivers. And Josh Allen's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Bills are one of the top elite offenses in the league. So if you can get a piece of that, especially if he's getting that volume that he is now, I think it's a great time for things to come.
Well, let's take a look at a couple NFC wide receivers. We'll start in Washington, where the Commanders' star wide receiver from last season, Terry McLaurin, had a slow start to the NFL season after holding in whatever he was doing, negotiating for more money, which he deserved. He got his bag, but he missed some training camp. Instead, it was Deebo Samuel who took over that Commanders offense against the Giants on Sunday. Talk to me about that split and what you think about that going forward.
Yeah, I think Deebo was a situation we weren't too sure on because of last year. His efficiency metrics were down. He just did not look good on the field. So I think people were shying away from picking up him anywhere. But when you look at Washington and specifically Terry started last season really slow too. I think he started last year with only 4 targets in week 1. He had 8 in week 2, but his fantasy output last year was only 2.7 and 5.2 fantasy points his first 2 weeks. And when you dig into why, I think the why is because Cliff Kingsbury starts the season off getting Jaden Daniels up to speed. He starts with a lot of short area targets to kind of ease Jaden Daniels into the season, build that confidence. And I think Deebo was the primary recipient of that. He had 10 targets this week to Terry's 4. So I'm not panicking in the streets about Terry. I think it's a slow start to the season. That's to be expected. I don't have him anywhere, but if I did have him, I would be a little hesitant to keep him in my lineup because I know that this is a trend that Cliff Kingsbury does. but I'm not selling him for pretty much anything. I think that he was one of the best values as far as getting a nice cheap wide receiver one right there with JSN and Garrett Wilson.
Well, speaking of JSN, he had a monster day on Sunday, too, as the Seahawks came this close to beating the 49ers. Jackson Smith and Jigba, what are we doing with the Seattle Seahawks wide receiver?
Yeah, JSN is actually a player that I have the most shares of because I believed in him, and I just saw a situation where either Sam Darnold maintains his, highs of being in Minnesota and he's great. JSN's going to be getting a decent slice of a good pie, or that offensive line's not good. Darnold's struggling. They're going to be playing from behind and they're just going to feed JSN. I think it landed kind of somewhere in the middle. The offensive line wasn't quite as bad as I would have expected, but I mean, he was just an absolute dominator, 59% target share. That obviously that's not going to continue all year, but it really showed the hand that he is the guy that Darnold wants to lean on. And it's just great for the rest of the season.
We'll take a look at another young receiver. This one on the opposite coast, NFC South. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Emeka Egbuka, the rookie, 2 touchdowns and outshined Mike Evans as the Baker Mayfield-led Bucs came back to beat the Falcons in Week 1. What did you like out of Egbuka, and where are you kind of feeling as far as his value?
I think his value's in a great spot right now. I think if you have him, you probably aren't going to sell him. And I think it would kind of cost a lot to get him. And I have full faith that he is going to maintain his role. I think with McMillan's injury in the offseason, it gave him and Baker time to develop that chemistry. So I don't think that this is a situation that's going to regress at all. You point to, oh, well, he had 2 touchdowns on 4 catches. So you think that the touchdown rate's going to regress. But I mean, he played 93% of snaps, I believe. I think that led all skill positions, wide receiver, running back, tight end. Evans played 6 fewer snaps than him. Now, granted, Evans still had 2 more targets than he did, but he's staying on the field. I don't think this is a situation where the team's going to see him scoring 2 touchdowns. And then, if McMillan comes back, they're like, all right, your time is done. Thanks, Rook, and move on from him.
Yeah, frankly, I think Egbuka is a better receiver than McMillan, and he might be a better receiver at this point than Chris Godwin when he gets back too. Godwin had 2 devastating lower body injuries recently, so who knows if he's the same when he gets back. Egbuka might ascend to that wide receiver 1B that we've seen Godwin be beside Evans the past couple of seasons. Let's move back to Indianapolis. We talked about the quarterback. Let's talk about the pass catchers. Josh Downs was kind of overshadowed by Michael Pittman, Tyler Warren. What's going on in Indianapolis, and how are you feeling about those pass catchers in particular?
Yeah, I saw all over Twitter all of the efficiency metrics about Josh Downs and how, yards per route run, targets per route run. He was just a machine, draft him everywhere. And everyone was just glancing over the fact that they drafted Tyler Warren at 14 overall. And me being a Penn State guy, I have faith in my guy, but it made me concerned that those efficiency metrics were going to dip. And I wasn't willing to pay the draft price for Downs, but absolutely would have and did for Tyler Warren. And it was everything to hope for and more for Tyler Warren. Downs, he only saw 3 targets, which was the same amount as Jonathan Taylor and Alec Pierce. But Pierce played 79% of the snaps and Downs played less than half, 49% of the snaps. It is major cringe city for Josh Downs. His trade value, stock value plummets. I don't even know if it's something that you want to try to capitalize on. I think Tyler Warren was just a focal point of this offense, and I don't expect that to change.
Well, Tyler Warren creates a nice little segue into tight ends for us. A couple other guys who performed extremely well was another rookie. We'll start in Cleveland with Harold Fannin and the way he kind of overshadowed David Njoku in that offense. What did you see in Cleveland that you liked, especially when it came into the tight end splits?
Yeah, I mean, you see Joe Flacco there, the tight ends are going to get peppered. I think that, we knew it was going to be one of them, and we assumed that Njoku was going to be the guy. Njoku Njoku and Flacco go back a ways. There's close to them. They're good friends. So I have Njoku in one of my leagues, and I was a little disappointed that Fannin got as much of the workload he did. But Fannin's production profile in college, he went to a smaller school, but I think he had the all-time most receptions in a season of a tight end. He was great, and I think that the Browns are a team that they kind of lean on historic production as an indication for we should really get this guy the ball. But I mean, when you look at Njoku still around, I think Njoku actually outpaced Fannin in snaps. He had about 9 more snaps than Fannin did, but Cleveland ran 12 personnel at the 6th highest rate. They ran it about 39% when the league average this past week was 25%. So both of them were on the field. There was 14 targets between them, and Fannin got 9 of them. So I think this is kind of a situation where they're both going to be involved. I think Fannin was just the one that had the more opportunities here in week 1 because he's a rookie. Maybe there was a little bit of game planning on Njoku, but I don't think really either of them are going to fall out of the picture here.
Yeah, this felt kind of like watching the Baltimore Ravens with 2 tight ends on the field at all times. Like Mark Andrews typically lined up in line like Njoku, and then Harold Fannin, that younger, more dynamic, more athletic tight end like Isaiah Likely. So this kind of feels like a Baltimore Ravens light situation where both of them can be fantasy relevant, just maybe not in the same game. So it might be a pick or choose kind of thing. I really liked what I saw out of Fannin. I liked that he was lined up in several different spots. They used him almost as a wide receiver 3 in addition to being a tight end 2. So I really liked what I saw out of that offense. And I can't believe I'm saying that about Cleveland. That feels really weird. But I'm actually in leagues where I have Kittle, I'm looking to get Fannin off the waiver wire this week.
Absolutely. And I think another name off the waiver wire is a guy that we're probably going to segue right into is Juwan Johnson. He played 99% of snaps for New Orleans. He had 11 targets, which was a 27% target share, which was the 4th most among tight ends behind only Goddard, Tyler Warren, and Trey McBride. He was absolutely a focal point in that offense. And he's definitely another guy that I've been targeting in leagues where I am looking for a tight end.
If Fannin and Johnson are both available on your wire and you are in search of a tight end, maybe to replace George Kittle, maybe to back up Brock Bowers if he gets an injury update, where are you ranking those 2 as far as waiver pickups this week?
My preference is Juwan Johnson because I think that he's in less of a target share battle there. I think that, there's Judy and Tillman are still there with Njoku. So there's really a kind of a bigger cluster there. And I mentioned before how Kellen Moore runs a fast-paced offense. So there's just going to be more volume in the New Orleans offense. I think they're probably going to be playing from behind more, lean more into the passing game. Not that Cleveland won't be as well, but I think so that might be a wash. But I think I would still keep Juwan Johnson over Fannin just out of more of a reliability. He was on the field the entire game.
Yeah, I may have to adjust that in my waiver claim rankings. Currently, I have Fannin and Jonnu Smith ahead of Juwan Johnson. I might have to take consideration into raising Johnson in that waterfall there. Before we go, let's talk about one more NFC South tight end. That's Atlanta Falcons' Kyle Pitts. Pitts put up a really nice stat line against the Buccaneers at home, working with Michael Penix. And as I pull that up, let's see. He had 8 targets, 7 receptions, 59 yards. This is some of the highest volume we've seen out of Pitts in quite a while. What did you like in week 1, and do you think it's sustainable?
If you're a Pitts believer, I think you deserve to be rewarded. I don't think anyone wanted to touch him. And, if that breakout is here, then by all means, you deserve to have, called your shot on this year. I wasn't one of those people. I don't think that I'm, rushing to try to trade for him either. But, with London's banged up right now, Mooney's banged up, there's a chance that he's going to be just absolutely peppered with targets next week. Or even weeks to come if London were to miss any more time, if Mooney isn't quite 100%. I think that the target share is probably going to stick.
I have a friend who drafted Kyle Pitts in our home league for the third consecutive year. So, Riley, this is for you. I hope that Kyle Pitts just keeps on trucking for you until you play me in a couple weeks.
I respect the stubbornness, and I'm glad that it would hopefully work out.
Chris, that wraps it up for Ball Street. Talk to us about where we can find you, where we can find your work.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Chris Helle QBL. My work is on QB List. I'm supporting our What We Saw. I'm very active in our Discord and on our Reddit page.
Excellent. You can find me at Fade That Man on social media. I am very active in the Discord, very active on Reddit on Monday mornings on the What We Saw, and writing the What We Saw as well. Usually take 1 or 2 games every week and share that with our readers. Make sure you check out our YouTube channel, YouTube at QB List. Very excited to begin populating that channel with content. This podcast will be up on YouTube later this week. So really excited to be expanding our video library and hopefully producing some shorts for Jay as well. Jay Felicio, our lead analyst, has been doing a great job coming up with some shorts content, some quick hitting stuff. And, we love to see it. We love the expansion, and we're really excited to get this season underway. Chris, thank you so much for joining us on Ball Street, the first episode. Really excited for how it went, and looking forward to next week as well.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time. Catch you later. And I will add the outro in post-production. That went really, really well. Excellent job.
Sweet. Yeah, no, that was good.
Yeah, that was awesome. I really like the format. I think this is a good start and a good way to go. Obviously, I want feedback from like Jay and Christian and them, but I'm very happy with how that went.
Yeah, me too. I think it'll be. I'm looking forward